If I was running Subaru, if I had my say, what I think would be a tremendously exciting product for them to build is a WRX STI Wilderness. Finally, after years of enthusiasts beating the drum, Subaru has officially revealed they are bringing back the WRX STI. The only thing is there are a couple of catches. For one, this car is only going to be offered with the automatic, the CVT. Subaru is only going to build about 500 of these cars. They're going to make around 296 horsepower, which is a decent bump over the WRX, but is less than the previous generation STI. And at this time, it's also unclear if this car is going to be sold in the US, and if it is, we would expect a starting price in the high $60,000, low $70,000 range. So, obviously, this is not the WRX STI model that we have been begging Subaru for. It's something different. And today, we're going to talk about why Subaru refuses to build that car and a potential compromise that I think would make all parties happy. But before we dive into any of that, let's just kind of level set and talk about why the WRX is such an important car. Subaru has a long history in rally racing dating back to the 1970s and the 1980s. And competing in rallying gave Subaru an opportunity to experiment with things like turbocharged engines and all-wheel drive, technology that would eventually make it into their road cars. And what better example of this than the 1992 Subaru WRX, with WRX standing for World Rally Experimental. This car featured a 2-liter turbocharged boxer 4-cylinder engine. It made around 240 horsepower, but was limited to selling only in the Japanese domestic market. In 1994, Subaru would one-up themselves by coming out with the Impreza WRX STI that basically just upgraded the car across the board. More power, beefier transmission, better suspension, more aggressive bodywork. Subaru would continue refining the WRX and STI models until they came out with the second generation of the car in 2001. And the key thing to know about this second generation car is that in 2001, it was the first WRX model to be sold in the US, with the STI kind of quickly following in 2004. And Subaru got a lot of complaints about the way that this car looked, which is kind of part of the reason why it was facelifted several times during its 6-year model run. In 2015, Subaru would divorce the WRX and STI from the Impreza model line, kind of making them their own standalone cars, even though they are still based on the Impreza. This would also be when Subaru introduced a new generation of engines into the WRX with the introduction of the FA. Now, from an outsider's perspective, the FA and the old EJ engines are similar in the fact that they're both boxer 4-cylinders, but people within the Subaru community do tend to have pretty strong opinions here. In 2022, Subaru would launch a new generation of the WRX, but the STI version was notably absent. And we're going to talk about that in depth in just a second. But first, I just want to take a step back and just talk about the impact the WRX had on car culture. The thing that really made this car special was just how strongly it was embraced by the aftermarket community. There is a plethora of aftermarket parts available for these cars. They're relatively easy to work on, and with a factory turbocharged engine, you could pretty easily get more power out of them without having to do anything too substantial. Combine that with a vehicle that has 4 doors and all-wheel drive, and you have something that's just well suited to do a lot of different things. And I've talked about this before, but these cars were incredibly impactful for me. And like a 2005 Subaru WRX STI was kind of my dream car throughout high school. And it would ultimately lead to me buying my first Subaru in the Outback XT. Now, admittedly, at the time, this was a little bit of a compromise because a clean WRX just wasn't available in my price range. But regardless, I was just obsessed with these cars. But zooming out a little bit, in the past couple decades, Subaru has really evolved. They have gone from kind of being this earthy, crunchy granola car brand to a very serious mainstream automaker. And with that comes a new target demographic for Subaru, what I would kind of refer to as like the outdoor urbanist type. People that want a vehicle that is semi-capable off-road, but also super practical and spacious, and they really don't have any interest in performance. And this strategy has been tremendously successful for Subaru. They are now one of the 10 biggest automakers in the US, but with this kind of comes some separation from their performance roots. There are rumors circulating that Subaru plans to kill off the BRZ, which is their only other performance-oriented car. And the brand also has really decreased their participation in various types of motorsport. In a way, I think Subaru is trying to become kind of what Toyota was in the mid-2000s when they discontinued all of their performance cars and just focused on making high volume, economical, practical vehicles. So to circle back around to the current generation of the WRX, I think that this car has been pretty watered down. When this new generation of the WRX came out, one of the biggest points of debate was about Subaru discontinuing that STI version. And there was your typical list of excuses here, from emissions and fuel economy concerns to Subaru's intent for this car to have a fairly short life cycle, so it wasn't worth the R&D to develop an STI version. But what they maybe weren't as forthcoming about was just the general downward trend of STI sales and Subaru's decreased interest in both motorsport and performance cars in general. And I've got a lot of other gripes with the new WRX. For one, it didn't really feature a meaningful increase of power over the prior generation of the car. And it also seems like Subaru has really been trying to funnel people towards the CVT. Like at launch, when the high performance GT trim that had Recaro seats and adaptive dampers was only available with the CVT. Now, Subaru has subsequently smartened up and added the manual transmission to the GT trim, but this kind of being their initial intent, I think really shows the direction that Subaru wants to move in, and it is not in the direction of performance cars. And while Subaru has refused up until this point to build an STI version of this car, it does appear that they've recognized there is an incredible amount of equity in this nameplate. And as such, they've tried to cash in on that equity without actually putting in the work to build a true STI model. That has came mainly in the form of the WRX TS, with the TS standing for Tuned by STI. And while this car does get some good enhancements, better brakes, better suspension, a nicer interior, it falls well short of what the STI model used to be. And the thing is, by advertising this as a TS and saying that it is tuned by STI, they are trying to appeal to enthusiasts who resonate with that STI brand, but these are the same type of people that are going to be incredibly frustrated that they haven't built the actual STI model that they've been asking for, which I think kind of defeats the purpose of what Subaru is trying to do here by cashing in on the brand equity, which is part of the reason why there was so much initial excitement when Subaru revealed the S210 WRX STI prototype at the Tokyo Auto Show. This is the first true full-fledged STI version of the current WRX model. But the more I learned about this car, the more disappointed I got. And we'll start just up top with the production numbers. They're only going to build about 500 of these. Now, this is very much in line with the production numbers that Subaru has done for other special editions. And what it indicates to me is that this is really more of a side project and not Subaru announcing a new addition to the WRX lineup. But even as a fun side project, this car just really isn't all that impressive or desirable. It does have a small bump in power, making about 25 extra horsepower. It has some aggressive aero and some really nice bucket seats, but it's only going to be available with the CVT. And as of now, we don't even know if this car is going to be sold in the US. If it is sold in the US, we can kind of use the old S209 as a pricing guide, which would probably put the S210 in the mid $60,000, maybe low $70,000 range. So even if this car is donning an STI badge, it really still is not the car that we've been asking Subaru for. So that kind of leads us to the bigger question at hand, which is, should Subaru be building a WRX STI model? From Subaru's perspective, they would likely argue it just doesn't make sense for them to build this type of car. They have become a tremendously successful automaker over the past decade, kind of despite these cars and not necessarily because of them. And as the relationship between Toyota and Subaru has grown increasingly closer, there could maybe even be a little bit of pressure from Toyota not to build a direct competitor to the GR Corolla. And while all of this may be true, I still think that by not building a car like this, Subaru is leaving money on the table. There is a reason that most automakers decide to build a halo car, because even if it is not tremendously profitable on its own, it generates excitement for the brand and helps to sell other models. Which is why I think it is absolutely essential for Subaru to have a car like this in their lineup. Now, what form that car comes in, I'm a little bit more flexible on. If they just kind of want to maintain the status quo, that S210 is a pretty good start. Just give it a manual transmission, maybe a little bit more power, and I think that would be well received by enthusiasts. But with that said, I think Subaru has the brand equity to do something radically different. Obviously, the roots of the WRX STI come very strongly from rally racing. And while Subaru corporate has had a decreased interest in rally as of late, a lot of people still associate it with the Subaru brand. And one of the ways that Subaru has decided to market themselves kind of over the past few years has been with a new Wilderness trim. This trim is available on models like the Crosstrek and the Outback, and it adds things like a slightly higher ride height, different wheels and tires, and slightly different bodywork. And the intent here is to add some light off-road capability, or at least the appearance of off-road capability, and sell these cars for a whole lot more. And totally independent of Subaru, there has been a recent trend in the car market, what I would kind of refer to as the rallyification of different models. At the high end, we've seen this with vehicles like the 911 Dakar and the Lamborghini Huracan Storado, basically making off-road versions of sports cars. We've also seen an incredible amount of fascination with high-performance off-road pickup trucks with vehicles like the Raptor and the TRX. And it appears that this is starting to trickle down market. It's expected that Ford is going to come out with a rally version of the Mustang Mach-E, and we also suspect that Hyundai could be working on a rally version of their Ioniq 5. It is clear that people really get excited about the idea of off-road performance cars, even if they might not ever actually get used off-road. Which is why, if I was running Subaru, if I had my say, what I think would be a tremendously exciting product for them to build is a WRX STI Wilderness. And it wouldn't have to be anything tremendously crazy, but an STI that featured a small suspension lift, skid plates, maybe some cosmetic lighting, and more aggressive bodywork. It would be nice to see it have a meaningful increase in power versus the WRX, but I don't think it would necessarily require a wholesale powertrain swap. But I think this car would be tremendously successful and would achieve everything that Subaru is aspiring to achieve. For one, it would respond to the very clear demands of the car market for more of these kind of rally-inspired performance cars. And it's not like this would totally come out of left field for Subaru to build something like this. Again, they have an extremely rich history and heritage in rally racing. And this car would also appeal to literally everyone. Hardcore Subaru enthusiasts would geek out over a new STI model, especially one that is even more so a street legal rally car. And since this car is kind of in its own lane, it really wouldn't be a direct competitor to things like the GR Corolla or Honda Civic Type R. But more importantly, by branding it as a Wilderness, Subaru is still assuring that it provides that mass market appeal. It would add additional visibility and recognition to the Wilderness brand by essentially merging it with their most iconic nameplate in the form of STI. It would only serve to add legitimacy and excitement to that Wilderness name. Overall, I just think it would be the type of halo car for Subaru that would make everyone happy. Of course, this car would not come cheap, but to be honest, most halo cars don't. I could easily see this car selling potentially over the $50,000 mark, and enthusiasts would be perfectly okay with that because, again, this isn't a car that is intended to sell to the masses. It's a car that's intended to get people excited about the brand. So, is it likely that Subaru will build this type of vehicle? Probably not. I think Subaru is perfectly content sitting atop their piles of money in their newfound market share. But if the brand really wants to take it to the next level, regaining the admiration of enthusiasts while still making an appeal to the broader car market, we know what they have to do. By cashing in on their most recognizable nameplate, tying that to the new brand that they're trying to build out, and bundling this all in a car that touches on the brand's heritage while also responding to market trends.